The rain was coming down in sheets that morning when Marcus saw her fall. The elderly woman collapsed right there on the wet pavement, groceries scattering everywhere, her umbrella tumbling into the gutter. He froze for just a second, his phone buzzing with the reminder about his interview, the one that could change everything for him and his daughter. Then he saw the woman trying to push herself up, her hands shaking, and Marcus knew he didn't have a choice. He ran toward her without thinking, his own interview suddenly feeling like it belonged to a different world. If you believe kindness always finds a way to come back around, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Kindness Tales and join our family of believers in human goodness. Hit that like button and share your own stories of unexpected kindness in the comments below, because every story matters. Marcus had been a single dad for 3 years now, ever since his wife passed away from cancer. His daughter Emma was 7 years old, bright as sunshine, and the only reason he kept pushing through the hardest days. He worked 2 jobs, one stocking shelves at a grocery store at night and another doing data entry from home during the day while Emma was at school. The pay barely covered rent in their small apartment, Emma's school supplies, and the mountain of medical bills that still arrived in the mail like unwelcome ghosts from the past. But this interview, this was different. A position as an administrative assistant at Morrison Industries, one of the biggest companies in the city. It meant real benefits, steady hours, weekends with Emma. He'd prepared for 2 weeks, borrowed a suit from his neighbor, practiced answers until he could recite them in his sleep. The interview was scheduled for 9:30, and Marcus had left early to make sure he'd arrive with time to spare. He was cutting through downtown, just 3 blocks from the Morrison building, when the storm hit. The sky opened up like someone had torn it apart, rain hammering down so hard it bounced off the sidewalk. That's when he saw her, the elderly woman in the cream-colored suit, struggling with her umbrella and a bag of groceries. She looked so elegant, so out of place in the suddenly violent weather, her white hair perfectly styled even as the wind tried to destroy it. Then her foot caught on something, maybe a crack in the pavement or just the slick surface, and she went down hard. Marcus heard the sound of it even through the rain, a terrible thud that made his stomach drop. He looked at his phone. 9:15. He could still make it if he kept walking. The Morrison building was right there, glass and steel gleaming through the rain. His future was 3 blocks away. But the woman was trying to get up and failing, her groceries rolling into the street, and there was no one else around. Everyone had ducked inside when the storm started. Marcus felt his chest tighten, that familiar feeling of the world asking him to choose between what he needed and what was right. He'd felt it so many times before, every time Emma needed something and he had to figure out where the money would come from, every time he wanted to rest but had another shift starting. He ran to her, his dress shoes splashing through puddles, the rain soaking through his borrowed suit in seconds. The woman was sitting on the wet pavement, her face pale with pain, one hand clutching her ankle. Up close, he could see she was older than he'd first thought, maybe in her 70s, with kind eyes that were now clouded with hurt and embarrassment. Marcus knelt beside her, ignoring the water seeping through his pants. He asked if she was okay, if she could move, and she nodded, but he could see the lie in her wince. Her ankle was already swelling. She tried to apologize, actually apologize to him for falling, as if it were somehow an inconvenience to him. Marcus felt something crack in his chest at that, the way people always felt they had to apologize for needing help. He told her to wait, not to try to move, and he gathered her scattered groceries first, shoving peppers and bread and a bunch of lettuce back into her soaked bag. His phone buzzed again. 9:20. He answered it while crouching there in the rain, and heard his own voice telling the HR department at Morrison Industries that he couldn't make the interview, that there was an emergency, his voice steady even though inside he was screaming. They were polite but firm. The position needed to be filled today. They'd be moving forward with other candidates. He thanked them and hung up, and for a moment he just stayed there, crouched in the rain, letting himself feel the weight of what he'd just lost. But the woman was looking at him with such concern, asking if everything was all right, and Marcus pushed it all down. He helped her to her feet, or tried to. She couldn't put weight on her ankle. So he did the only thing that made sense. He picked her up, this elegant stranger, one arm under her knees and one behind her back, and he carried her. She protested but weakly, and then she just held on, her arm around his neck, her groceries clutched to her chest. Marcus asked where she lived and she pointed down the street, just 2 blocks. He carried her through the rain, his muscles burning, his suit completely ruined, and he didn't let himself think about the interview or the bills or how he'd explain this to Emma. He just focused on getting this woman home safely, on being the kind of person his daughter could be proud of. Her building was nice, much nicer than his, with a doorman who rushed out with an umbrella when he saw them coming. The woman insisted Marcus come up to her apartment, said she needed to at least give him money for dry cleaning, and he started to refuse, but she gave him a look that reminded him so much of his own mother that he couldn't say no. Her apartment was beautiful, tasteful and warm, filled with photos of what looked like a large family. She directed him to set her on the couch and immediately started fussing over his soaked suit, apologizing profusely. She asked his name and he told her, Marcus Chen, and she introduced herself as Eleanor Morrison. The name didn't register at first. He was too busy feeling the full impact of what he'd just done, how he'd thrown away his one good chance. Eleanor insisted on getting him towels, hobbling to the bathroom despite his protests. When she came back, she asked what the emergency call had been about. Marcus tried to brush it off, said it was nothing, but she kept looking at him with those kind eyes until the truth just spilled out. He told her about the interview, about Emma, about the bills and the 2 jobs and how that position would have changed everything. He didn't mean to say so much, but something about her made it easy to talk, made him feel like maybe it was okay to admit how hard things had been. Eleanor's face changed as he talked. Something shifted in her expression, became more intent, more focused. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked him which position he'd been interviewing for, and he told her. Administrative assistant in the executive offices at Morrison Industries. She nodded slowly, and then she said something that made his world tilt sideways. She told him she knew the position well. She should, considering her son ran the company. Marcus stared at her, his mind trying to catch up. Eleanor Morrison, Morrison Industries. He'd been so focused on his own crisis that he hadn't connected the dots. This woman, this elegant stranger he'd just carried through the rain, was the mother of Richard Morrison, the CEO whose name was on every piece of literature Marcus had studied for his interview. Eleanor was already reaching for her phone, and Marcus tried to stop her, saying he didn't want charity, didn't want her to feel obligated, but she waved him off. She called her son right there, and Marcus could only sit frozen as she explained what had happened, how this young man had sacrificed his interview to help her, had carried her home in the rain, had shown the exact kind of character that was so rare these days. 3 days later, Marcus found himself back at the Morrison Industries building, this time dry and in a suit that actually fit, one that Eleanor had somehow had delivered to his apartment. He met with Richard Morrison himself, who shook his hand and said his mother hadn't stopped talking about him. The interview wasn't really an interview at all. Richard offered him the position on the spot, with a salary that made Marcus's eyes water. But more than that, he offered something Marcus hadn't expected. He said the company needed people who understood what it meant to sacrifice for others, who chose kindness even when it cost them everything. Marcus started the following Monday. The job was everything he'd hoped for and more. He had health insurance for the first time in years. He could take Emma to the doctor for her checkups without calculating if they could afford it. He worked normal hours and spent evenings with his daughter, helping with homework, making dinner together, being present in a way he hadn't been able to be when he was working 2 jobs. But the biggest change wasn't the money or the hours. It was Eleanor. She became part of their lives, insisting on meeting Emma, showing up with books and art supplies, becoming the grandmother Emma had never known. She told Marcus that he'd given her something precious that rainy morning, not just help but a reminder that there were still good people in the world, people who chose right over easy. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create ripples we never see coming. Marcus made a choice that morning in the rain, a choice that cost him something he desperately needed, and that choice came back to him multiplied in ways he never could have imagined. But here's the truth that matters most. He didn't help Eleanor because he knew who she was or what might come from it. He helped her because it was the right thing to do, because when we see someone in need, we have a choice about who we want to be in that moment. Every day we face these choices, these tiny crossroads where we decide between our own convenience and someone else's need. And every single time we choose kindness, even when it's hard, even when it costs us, we're building a world where compassion matters more than convenience. Marcus taught his daughter that lesson not with words but with action, and Eleanor made sure that lesson came full circle. So the next time you see someone who needs help, remember that kindness is never wasted. It always matters, always makes a difference, even when we can't see how yet. Share your own stories of choosing kindness in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear today.